Hello students. So today we're going to go over steps, skips, leaps, and scales. I'm going to show you what these are, and I'm going to show you some different examples of how they will look on the treble staff so that you are prepared to do your assignment for this week on Jamboard. I can see that most of you are getting the hang of Jamboard and that you know how to turn in a Jamboard on Google Classroom, which is great. You will not be drawing anything this time around. What you will be doing is simply dragging notes onto the staff using the select tool right here, the arrow tool. Okay, so as you can see, we have a 5-line staff with a treble clef, all right, and we have the letters of the lines. Eddie's green boots don't fit, E, G, B, D, F, and we have the letters of the spaces, F, A, C, E, which spells face. These letters will not be here when you do your assignment on Jamboard. This is just for the purpose of this video, to give you a reference, okay? What I want you guys to start doing is memorizing the letters of the lines and the spaces on the staff. You don't have to memorize them by next week, but you want to start getting the hang of memorizing where they are, okay? Because that's a skill that every musician should have. Okay, so let's talk about steps. What is a step? So hopefully you watched the introductory video that I posted yesterday. It gave you a little bit of a review of the treble staff, and it also started to talk to you about steps, skips, and leaps. Okay? Now, if you watched that video, you would have seen that a step is the distance between any two notes in which one note is on a space and the next note is on the line next to that space. Or it could be when the first note is on a line and the next note is on the space next to that line. Okay, now the distance that I'm speaking of is called an interval. Okay, this is a key word. Interval is a fancy word for distance, okay, or measurement. So the interval or distance or measurement of a step involves going from a space to a line or from a line to a space. Okay, now the reason why they call it a step is because it literally looks like you're going up or down a step, right? Up a step, down a step, up a step, down a step, okay? It's one step from space to line or from line to space, okay? Now, technically, the interval of a step is called a second, okay? As you can see here, number 1 is asking us to create a step of a second up from A, and that's exactly what I did. Okay, so now why is it called a second? When you count the steps between the first note and the next note, it's literally 2 counts. Now this might be a little confusing because you might be thinking, well, isn't it just one step from this note to that note? And the answer is yes. However, when you're counting the steps, you always start with the first note. Okay, this is how you measure an interval. So you always start with the first note and you count 1. Okay, so this first note is the first count. Then when I move up a step, that's the second count, 2. And that happens to be where this note is located. So because I stopped at 2, this is called a second. I'll go over that again. We start with the first note and we count 1. Then we move up a step from this space to this line right here and we count 2. Since the note is located on that line, I'm going to stop. And since I stopped on the number 2, this interval is called a second, okay? So a step is also considered to be a second, all right? So number 1 asks to create a step of a second up from A. So I went up a step from A by counting A as 1, and then moving up a step, counting the next line, which is B, as 2, okay? And then that's a second. So let's move on to number 2, and let's talk about a skip. This is asking us to create a skip of a third up from A. So in layman's terms, a skip is the distance between 2 notes, or the interval between 2 notes, in which the first note is on a space and the next note is on the space above or below that space, okay? You can see that this next note here is in the space above this note space. And keep in mind, what I just did was when I went to number 2, I crossed over a measure line. This is called a measure line right here, this vertical line. So right now I'm only talking about these 2 notes within these 2 measure lines, okay? Number 2 is within these 2 measure lines inside this area here, which is called the second measure. This would have been the first measure here. This is the second measure, okay? Now going back, if the first note were on a line, then if I were to create a skip, then the next note would have to be on the line above that line, or the line below that line. So as you can see, both of these notes are on a line, and they can also both be on a space, okay? Since I'm starting from A, this is the first note, so then a skip up from A would have to be on the space above the A space, which would be the C space. Okay, it's not on the line above A, it's on the space above A. The reason why they call it a skip is because you are skipping over this line to get to that next space. So you start on this space, then you skip the line, and you end up on that space. It's just like if you're on a staircase and you decide to skip one of the steps on the staircase. Okay, here's one step, and then you skip over another step, and you land on this step. All right? Now, why is a skip also called a third? Let's see if we can figure it out. We have to remember to count the first note as 1, okay? Then we move to the next step. Notice I said step, not skip. We move to the next step, which is this line here, the B line, and we count that step as 2. Now here's the question. Is the note we're looking for on this line? No, it's not, because we're only working with the second measure here. I'm not worried about this measure right now, the first measure. I'm worried about the second measure. And in this second measure, there is no note on this line. So we can't stop there. We have to keep going. So what number did we stop at so far? 2. So now we have to keep going. Let's go up to the next space. Okay, that's another step. And what are we counting? 3. And since this note is located on the third step from the first note, we are going to call this interval a third. We counted 3 when we arrived at that note, so we're going to call that interval a third. I'll show you again. First note is counted as 1. We move up a step to the line. There's no note on the line, so we count 2 and we keep going. We arrive on the next space and we count 3, and there's the note. And because we counted 3, the interval is called a third. A third is the technical term for a skip. Okay? Let's move on to number 3. Number 3 is asking us to create a leap of a fourth from A. Okay? So now, what is a leap? A leap is any interval that is larger than a step or a skip. Any interval that is larger than a second or a third. So you could use your eyes to figure this out. We know that this looks like a step, right? This looks like a skip. Now, anything greater than that, meaning if the note moves even farther away than that, that's considered a leap. This is a leap. This is also a leap. This is also a leap. Okay? And you can also leap downwards too. Okay? But we are looking for a specific kind of leap. We are looking for a leap of a fourth up from A. A fourth. So that means we have to count 4 from A. All right? So let's bring our note back down here and let's count 4 from A. We have to start with A. We have to start with the first note. So we're counting 1. Then we move up to the next step, which is a line. Okay? It's very important that you guys understand that when you're moving in steps, it's always space, line, space, line, space, line. It's not space, space, space. Those would be skips. Or line, line, line would be skips as well. All right? We always alternate. So we count the A as 1. We move up a step to the next line. We count 2. Okay? We haven't reached number 4 yet, so we're going to keep going. We go up to the next step, which is a space here. And we count 3. Okay? We haven't reached the 4 yet, so we're going to keep going. We move up another step to this line here, and we count 4. Now we've reached the number 4. So that means this line is the location of my next note. Okay? That is a fourth. I'll show you again. We counted the first note as 1. We moved up a step to the next line and counted 2. We moved up to the next space and counted 3. Then we moved up to the next line and counted 4. Once we reached the number 4, we figured out that that is where this note belongs. Okay? All right. Moving on to number 4, we are going to create a scale going up from F this time. What's a scale? Whenever I teach my students about scales for the first time, I love to introduce the word escalator. You might be familiar with what an escalator is if you've ever gone to a shopping mall. An escalator is the moving set of stairs that runs on electricity, and it moves up and down so that it carries people up and down without you having to physically walk up and down. So it's a moving set of stairs. That's an escalator. Okay? So this word scale is the root word of the word escalator. Okay? Because the word escalator contains the word scale in the middle of it. Escalator. All right? So what does an escalator do? It goes up and it goes down. But remember, it's a staircase. So it doesn't just go up in leaps. It goes up and down in steps, like a staircase. So a scale can go up or down, but either way, for it to be a scale, it must move in steps. And usually a scale contains more than just 2 or 3 notes. Usually it contains a series of 7 or 8 notes, okay? And they're all in a row, and sometimes it can go up and down. So sometimes it repeats itself. Fancy term for that is oscillate, okay? So let me show you an example of a scale going up from F. So we are moving up, so we have to remember that we're moving in steps, okay? So one step up from F is this line here, which would be G. And you'll also notice that G is one letter after F in the musical alphabet as well as the regular alphabet. What comes after F? G. Okay? Now, let's move our next note to the next step. Okay? So, another step from this line is this space. One step from this line up is this space here. Okay? Now, you'll notice that the letter of this space is A. Okay? And you might be wondering, well, before you said that G comes after F in the alphabet, but I'm not used to hearing that A comes after G in this alphabet. Well, you have to remember we're using the musical alphabet. So in the musical alphabet, we're only dealing with A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then after G, it starts over again at A. Okay? So the letter that comes after G in the musical alphabet is A. Okay? Not H, I, or J, but A. Okay? So in this case, that does make sense. All right? One step up from G is A. So right now we have F, G, and A. Now, once we start over again at A, it gets to be really simple. Our next step is up from this space. It would be this line right here, and that would be B. Okay? Now, the letter B comes after the letter A in the musical alphabet as well as the regular alphabet. Okay? All right, moving right along. We're going to drag this note up to this space here because this space is one step up from that line. I think you're starting to notice a pattern, I would hope. You're seeing that we're alternating between spaces and lines. Space, line, space, line, space. All right? Now, also, you can check by looking at the letters. This note is on the C space. C is one letter after B in the musical alphabet. B, C. A, B, C. Makes sense, right? We're moving in steps. Now, if I were to move this note up here, first of all, it doesn't look right because we're alternating between spaces and lines, and then all of a sudden we skip to a line. That's not what a scale does, usually. Okay? Usually a scale moves in steps. So you'll also notice that if this note were on this line, that would be the D line. Is D one letter after B in the musical alphabet or the regular alphabet? No. D is 2 letters away from B because between them is C. So that's how we also know that we must put the next note on this space. Okay? Now, if we keep going, I think you'll agree it gets easier as you go. That note is on the D line, which is one step above C. That line is one step above that space. Next note would go on the space above that line. And then we're going to shift everybody over a little bit to create some room. And finally, our last note goes on the top line. Okay? And now we have a scale going up from F. F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. Notice how the top note has the same letter as the bottom note. Okay, now you'll notice that I used up all the notes that were on the bottom here. I drew just enough notes for you so that you'll know if you're finished or not. Okay? If you run out of notes before you finish, that means you used too many notes. If you still have notes left over when you're finished, that means you didn't finish and you need to keep going. Okay? So you have a grand total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 notes that you have to move. Okay? So you will be also receiving a point for each of those notes. So this will be a 10-point assignment. All right, now what I'd like to do is undo everything. So we're going to do a super undo and go back to where we began. All right, and we should also take this time to write our name. Okay, now my text happens to be set to blue. Yours does not have to be unless you want to be creative. You could change the color to any color you want. Okay, I'm going to keep mine to blue because that's my favorite. Now, I noticed that a lot of you, when you wrote your name on your Jamboards, you used the pen tool and you tried to write your name like this. Notice how hard of a time I'm having with that. Does that look good to you? I don't think so, right? Why would you make your life more difficult and use the pen tool? Use the text box tool and type your name so that it looks neat. All right? You guys have to make sure you watch my video tutorial so you know how to do all of this. Okay. Now, just so that we're all clear, I'm going to show you some examples of... I'm going to show you similar examples, but this time we're going to be moving down from a certain letter. All right, so bear with me here while I... Okay, so here we have a new set of directions, and this time we're going to be moving down from C in the first 3 examples, and down from F in the last example. Okay? So starting with number 1. Now we're creating a step of a second down from C. So this should be very simple because you know that a step is supposed to be the line or space that comes right after the note that was given to you. So if the given note is on a space, then for it to be a step, the next note must be on the line below it, right? Space, line, okay? You can see that that's a step. Now, if you want to be absolutely sure, what you do is you count the first note as 1, and then you move a step down, which would be this line, and you count 2. Since that's where the note is located, we stop counting at 2. Since we stopped counting at 2, the interval is called a second, okay? Also, you'll notice that this note here, the given note, was on C. This note here that I just dragged is now on the B line. B is 1 step down from C. It is 1 letter backwards from C in the alphabet. Okay? So we stepped down from C to B. All right? And number 2 is asking for a skip of a third down from C. Okay? So you know that a skip, in the event of a skip, both notes must be either on a line or a space. So in this case, since the first note, the given note C, is on a space, then a skip down from C must be on the space below C, which would be this space A. If you want to be absolutely sure, you're going to count from C down a third. So starting with the first note C, that's 1. We go 1 step down to this line, and we count 2. The note is not there, so we keep going. Moving another step down to this space here, we count 3. And since that's where the note is, we stop counting at 3. And since we stopped counting at 3, this is called a third. Okay? C to A. We moved backwards from C to A. Okay? Which is an interval of a third. Because we start counting from the first note. Okay? Now, this number 3 is a bit different than before. We're going to create a leap of a fifth down from C. Okay? Notice how this time, not only is it going down from C, but now it's a fifth instead of a fourth. So, let's see. If we start with the first note C, we count 1. We move 1 step down to this line, okay? And we count 2. Obviously, we're not at the number 5 yet, so we have to keep going. We move down to this space here. That's the next step. We count 3. We have to keep going. We move down to this line here. That's the next step. We count 4. We're still not there yet. So now we move down one more step to this bottom space and we count 5. Now that we've reached the number 5, that's a fifth. So that's where our note belongs, in this space. So we drag our note there. That is a leap of a fifth down from C. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. From C to F. All right. Now, number 4 is now asking for a scale going down from F. So as you might imagine, this would be the same thing as before, except now we're starting on the top F and we're moving down to the bottom F. So might as well put one note on the bottom F so we know where we're going to stop. And now it's just a matter of filling in the blanks. And I have exactly 6 notes left, so it's kind of like putting a puzzle together. All right? Even if I go in random order, as long as I use up all my notes, it should work out. And it did. Here's my scale going down from F. I basically just placed all the notes on the lines and spaces in between F and F. And I made sure every line and space was accounted for. Because let's say I left out a space, you could see there's a gap here. Okay? And that doesn't look right. Okay? So this looks like a scale. Okay? Okay, students. So I reset everything, and I'm showing you what the questions will be on your Jamboard for this week, now that you understand what to do. There is a small chance that these questions might change a little bit. If they do, then just simply do exactly what the Jamboard asks you, even if it's a little different from this video right now. But most likely, that will not be the case, all right? So you can expect this week to create a step of a second up from C, then you'll create a skip of a third up from D, then you'll create a leap of a sixth down from F, and then you'll create a scale going down from E, okay? And I tried to make it easy for you by giving you the first note in each example, so you don't have to figure out where C is, or where D is, or where F is, or where E is, okay? However, you will have to figure out where the next note belongs in each example. So under each measure, you'll see there is a note waiting for you to drag it to its proper location for measures 1, 2, and 3. And then in measure 4, you have 7 notes that you need to drag to their proper location. Okay? So don't forget to put your name on it. And when you're finished, turn it into Google Classroom. If I notice that there are some mistakes that you can fix, I will return it to you, meaning I will give it back to you and say, please fix these mistakes so I can give you full credit. So I might return it to you with 8 out of 10 points, 7 out of 10 points, and I might say, here, fix these 2 or 3 things for me, and then I'll give you 10 out of 10. Okay? So if you receive a 7 out of 10, don't think, oh man, that's no good. I didn't want to get a 7. Don't get upset about it. Just try to fix the mistakes that I ask you to fix, and if you make a genuine effort to do that, then I will give you more points. Okay? Now, if you turn something in that's completely blank, then there's nothing I can do for you. I'm just going to turn it back to you without a grade, and I'm going to say, please finish this and resubmit it. Okay? All right. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment in Google Classroom. You can also send me a private comment, or you can send me an email. I also encourage you to watch the video that I posted yesterday if you didn't get a chance to watch it yet, because that'll get you prepared for this assignment as well. Okay. Have a great week.